middle of things. Thank you everyone for who's joining us. My name is Vasu. I'm the CEO and co-founder of MaestroQA. For those of you who don't know MaestroQA, we help customer service teams have better quality conversations with their customers by helping our customer service teams analyze conversations, understand what's going on in the quality of them, and then take action through coaching a rep so that they can be better professionals and result in better customer service conversations. So thank you all so much again for joining us. And Shep, can you give a quick introduction?
Sure. My name's Shep Hyken, customer service experience expert. I work with companies on creating amazing experiences. I do a tremendous amount of work in the customer support world. Some of you, I'm looking for names that might be familiar. I wish I could see who the companies were, but I'm sure we've had a chance to work or talk with each other. And I'm excited to be here, Vasu. Thank you so much for having me.
Shep, thank you so much for joining us. I'm really excited to hear your wisdom and riff on a couple of topics with the group today. So the first question, or the quick agenda for the group, we're going to spend about 30 minutes. Shep and I are just going to riff on a couple of questions. And if anyone wants to partake, we kept this a little bit more intimate intentionally. So either put an emoji up or go off camera and or put a question in the chat. Whatever way you feel comfortable interacting with us, please do. But yeah, 30 minutes, we're going to riff. And then we'll open up the floor for some Q&A, and we're going to aim for around 40 to 45 minutes for this discussion. Anything you want to add there, Shep?
No, I think that's perfect. I would love if people wanted to jump in and participate, because it'll just make it that much more interesting for all of us.
Awesome. So let's talk about the world of customer service. And Shep, why don't we kick it off with how you've seen customer service change in terms of philosophy and mindset from 20 years ago to today?
From 20 years ago, you know what?
Some different generation.
Yeah, just so everybody knows, this was not the question that was in the script.
Yep. Yeah, I already went off script.
I love that. I love that. So, well, let's talk about what's changed. I'm going to give you an answer that isn't on the script either, because just so you know, we did a little tech check and we did a little, like, here's the questions we plan to ask. And I shot back some very short answers. But 20 years ago is a great question. If you ask me what's changed 20 years ago, 50 years ago, or even just from last year, I would say to start with, nothing has really changed. And what I mean by that is a customer is going to reach out to us. They've got a problem, they've got a question, they may even have a complaint. And at the end of that interaction, however we do it, they want to be happy. That's it. I don't believe that has been any different for the last 20 years, 50 years, 150 years. Now, what has changed is the technology that we're using to support the customer. We have all types of different channels, but at the end of the day, today's customer doesn't really care about channels. They care about the ability to connect with whoever it is they're doing business with. And that could be direct on the phone, which impacts all of us. It could be a chat, which I think is also important. I recognize MaestroQA can work with us to help our agents create a better experience through that. It could be through a self-service type of solution, whether it be AI-infused chat, a chatbot, or it could be on a social channel. It could be even a frequently asked question site or a video tutorial. So we've got lots of different ways of achieving the same outcome that we've always wanted, and that is for the customer to be happy. Now, there's one other thing I'd love to share. If you go back even just a year or so ago, and I've got what's interesting about what I'm about to share is going all the way back into, believe it or not, the 1980s, when I first started studying the research on customer service and how companies react. Some really cool stats came out. We do a report every year. We call it the Achieving Customer Amazement Report. And we ask customers what is most likely to bring them back. And this is what they said: employees that are kind and helpful. So if our agents are nothing more than kind and helpful, that's the number one reason customers say, I like doing business with them. Of course, able to reach the right person for the first try. Employees are knowledgeable, so helpful, friendly, and knowledgeable. I think that's that's table stakes to get into this business. What's interesting is that if you go back into the 1980s, where the Technical Assistant Research Program, which was commissioned by the White House Office of Consumer Affairs, they asked the number one reasons customers would leave. And basically, it's the opposite of friendly and helpful. It's apathy and rudeness. So think about how, really not much has changed in the way of what's expected. This is what customers want.
No, thank you. Thank you for that answer, Shep. And Rachel, I see you go off camera, so I want to get if you have a question, if that's a sign of a question, I want to make sure I get it in. But one second, just to close it out, I think that's an awesome answer, Shep, and thanks for breaking it down. I think one note is, I think we always, as consumers ourselves, we've always known that we always want to be given helpful and great service. But I don't know if companies had always viewed customer service as critical to achieving that. And I feel like there's been a mindset shift there where in the more recent years, there's been a focus on experience versus in the past. And so I'm curious if that's something you've seen in your research and why you think companies are also becoming more experience focused more recently than in the past.
Are you saying experience different from customer service, or are you grouping those two terms?
What I'm saying is companies are more focused on the quality of the experience within customer service now than they did maybe 40 years ago. And I'm curious if you've also recognized the shift in companies actually caring about the quality of the customer service and making customers happy and delightful more now than in the
past. And I see that two questions. Let's talk about the first, service versus experience, because 30, 40 years ago, even 20 years ago, the terms customer experience were, that was not a really active phrase or term that people use. They thought of customer service as exactly what we do, serving the customer. It's always been my thought that service is not a department, it's a philosophy to be embraced by everybody. And that means salespeople, accountants in the back who may once in a while get a phone call about a bill that might be sent out, an invoice. It could be internal customer service to taking care of each other. Now, somebody a long time ago really got smart and say, let's stop calling this customer service. Let's call it something fancier, and that's customer experience. And very quickly, people started using these terms interchangeably. And what happened then is somebody said, wait a minute, experience is much more than just customer support. Let's take a look at this, from the entire journey that the customer has. And it includes everything from the moment they even think about us, may see an ad, jump on a website, eventually talk to us, buy from us, get customer support. And even when they receive a box and they open it up, what's that experience like? Steve Jobs was amazing at creating this unbelievable, ultra cool experience when you got a new iPhone or an iPad, or way back whenever, whatever those little musical, it was, what was that called? The iPod. There you go. So I haven't had one of those in so long. But I was one of the first. Anyway, so experience become more. Now, the second part of this question is, what makes, what's happening today? Companies are more interested in this. And the reason they're interested in it, there's all types of stats that will show that people go out of their way to do business with a company that provides better service and better support. Number two, they pay more money if you give them a better experience, typically in the form of service and support. And with those two things in mind, why wouldn't a company want to do that? Number three, the competitive differentiator that a company with good service versus bad service has is pretty big. Let me share with you another stat that I think is important. 78% of the people, we surveyed over 1,000 US consumers. 78%, by the way, if you're in other parts of the world, this still applies. Maybe the numbers might be a little bit different. And if you're B2B, if that's your main market is B2B, the numbers are different, but the concepts still do apply. 78% of Americans are willing to go out of their way to do business with a company that provides better service. That's a competitive differentiator. 58% think that great service is more important than price. That's huge. And if the service is convenient, that number goes up dramatically to about, I want to say 70% if it's more convenient. What does more convenient mean? Actually, it's 71%. Self-service tools. How long you're going to keep me on hold? Does the number get me through to the right person, or do I have to be put on hold, transferred, hold again, transferred? The easier you make it for me, the more likely I am to want to come back and do business with you.
Thank you so much for Shep. I think that's a great answer. And Rachel, do you have a question?
I just turned my camera on, but I'm sure I'll have a question later.
We love seeing you, Rachel. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. Cool. So Shep, The other reason, and if there's anything you can elaborate on, I feel like we see our customers focus more and more on experience, and why the C-level is starting to put a spotlight on the customer service experience is in large part related to increased competition in this digital world. How if you ride Uber, you're a click away from Lyft, or if you use Grubhub, you're a click away from DoorDash. That customer expectation has gone up. The combination of the customer expectations have gone up as brands like Apple and Airbnb set a new bar. Plus, the cost of switching has never been lower. And I'm curious if you have any insight on that as also being a reason why companies are focusing more on the experience and why
Yeah,
those
well,
stats.
if you can create a sticky solution, and by the way, it used to be very difficult to switch from one bank to another, but now, thanks to the digital experience, it's easier than ever, which means that we've got to up our game on the experience, or we will lose customers. There's no doubt about it. If all you are is okay, then the moment something presents itself that's a little bit better than okay, your customer is going to say, okay, maybe this is what I need to be looking at. This is what I need to be doing. You also mentioned you're one click away on some of these solutions. Something that Amazon has done amazingly well, and I don't think they realized they were doing it at the very beginning, but what happened is Amazon became a part of the customer's life. Now, this is an extreme example, but if there's a way to weave whatever it is that you do into the fabric of your customers' lives and make it so it's normal for them to communicate with you. And by the way, that doesn't mean they're calling you for customer support all the time. We can get into marketing, content marketing, putting the right information in front of the customer at the right time that isn't real salesy, but actually helpful. You start to become a part of that customer's life. They expect to see something in their inbox or on their phone in the text messaging. So I would think the goal of any business is to not just create an experience that makes people want to come back, but create a relationship that people feel connected to you as well.
Yeah, thank you so much for adding that. And one of the things that with this shift has been, if you're running a customer service team, actually, for anyone in the audience, if you can think about what kind of, based on the company you're at and if the industry and competitors you have, if you feel this challenge and how you're responding to this challenge, would love for a note in the chat and we can circle back to it later. No pressure, but if anyone feels comfortable doing that, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, and if anybody wants to step up and share an example of what they're doing to, basically shut down a competitor, we would love to hear you. What's your best customer service secret weapon? I know what it should be. Should be MaestroQA coaching your agents in real time. But let's not do the commercial. That's not my job.
No, we didn't pay Shep for that, I promise. So let's talk about metrics. If you're running a customer service team and you're now more focused, you're not just customer service, but your customer experience. What were the metrics that dominated a customer service team 10, 20 years ago? And what are you seeing become more prevalent these days?
Yeah. So average handle time. Oh my gosh. That's been probably one of the most important metrics, but at the same time, it's also one of the most limiting metrics. We want our people to create an experience where when the interaction is finished, if they were to receive, the customer would receive a survey, even with something like a CSAT on a scale of 1 to 10, were you happy, or 1 to 5, NPS on a scale of 0 to 10, what's the likelihood that you'd recommend? We all want our customers to give us high scores, but we aren't sometimes allowing our agents to break away from the traditional metric of an average handle time, which to me is the most limiting metric, because if we take a look at a customer's profile and we answer the question the exact way we should, but we notice there's an opportunity to answer a question that we know the customer is going to have down the road, they just haven't thought about it yet. Why not take a moment to answer it then and there? The cost of a customer calling back, number one, the cost and aggravation of a customer calling back is the customer's time and the effort. However, the cost to us is we have to go through the same process of authenticating the customer, bringing the customer's record up, understanding what the problem is again, and then answering that second question. If we can be proactive, and I like to use that word, proactive is a way to describe proactive service. Today, customers expect proactive service. Most of them think it's call me before I know there's a problem. But when they're on the phone with us or they're interacting with us in any way, if we have a chance to answer questions, if we have a chance to maybe even notice, and I'll give you a great example. I'm not going to mention the name of the company. It's the carrier that I use for my, Wi-Fi, cell phone, that kind of thing. If I was on the phone with them and they said, I'm looking at your profile here, I might be able to save you some money. Whoa, you took an extra moment to look at my profile and tell me how I can better utilize your service. You just locked me in, showing me that you care. Why can't every rep be this good, right? And this is the kind of experience we want so that our customers will say, I love them and I'll be back.
I think that's super spot on. And Rachel, thank you for the question. We'll definitely circle back to that. It's in the chat, Shep, so we'll come back.
Okay, yeah, I see that. Can I add one other thing to this answer? I wrote a book a few years ago, probably about maybe almost 10 years ago, called The Amazement Revolution. I interviewed a gentleman named Jim Bush, who at the time was the executive VP worldwide of customer service for American Express. And there were a lot of great insights that he gave me. There were two that I found that were fascinating. One is the kind of people he wanted to hire, which if you want to, I'll get into that. It's up to you. I see a head shake. So let me go there first. He said, if I had a choice between somebody that worked in a support center for 10 years or somebody that never worked in a support center, but worked at the front desk of a hotel, I'm going to hire the person with the hospitality mentality because that's what I want my customers to experience. By the way, that's not necessarily right for everyone, but that was right for American Express. The other thing they did is they said, we eliminated the average handle time for the purpose of making sure that when we finished with the call, that the customer would be willing to recommend us to someone using the NPS scale of 0 to 10. What's the likelihood you recommend? I thought, well, that's really interesting because a company that large, they're looking at a lot of different metrics. By the way, you don't waste time. Every word that you say has to be meaningful and it has to be on target. And it has to be about supporting that customer and making the customer come back. So we're not talking about the famous Zappos.com call that took 10 hours when the salesperson or customer support person found out that, oh, you're moving to Las Vegas. Let me tell you about the schools. Let me tell you where you want to raise your kids. We're not talking about that. We're talking about sticking to business and giving the customer the experience that they want. Whoop, did we put you on mute?
My bad.
Okay.
Yep. I was saying, I think I see another question pop in, but which we'll circle back to as well. But that really resonates. It's something we've seen metrics where solves per hour is the primary metric, or average handle time is the only metric. And yeah, it's like if you tell your agents this is the number one metric that matters, it's not their fault. It's the system and what you're incentivizing that's going to lead to experiences that focus on shorter average handle times or more solves per hour. And yeah, I was talking to someone who works at Crocs, and he mentioned we're not focused on getting on the call and off the call as fast as possible. Like that's not the most important thing for our customers. And yes, like if you have a standard average handle time, that's nice and it's easy to measure costs and measure how your team will scale, but it could be at the expense of the customer. The shorter the average handle time doesn't necessarily mean it's a better experience. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it means you're resolving the issue quickly, but it could also mean that when the customer goes, oh, I have one more thing, and you go, oh, never mind, I can't answer that now. Call me back for another call. Like that would be absurd if you're someone new there.
It would be, yeah.
And so what we're seeing is, I did a webinar with one of our friends at Etsy and another one with one of our friends at Staples. And both of them mentioned how, they had these more productivity metrics originally, but since they, as a customer service org, started to shift into a customer experience centric org, they started to focus a lot more on metrics like quality and CSAT and really focusing on those. And that's a huge part of how we've seen it shift and what our customers are more oriented around today. Have you seen a similar shift in those?
Yeah, the only time so it's interesting, the clients that I work with, almost every single client is already doing a great job. They just want to sustain or do it even a little bit better job. Once in a while, I'll hit a company that needs a complete overhaul. That's a fun project to do. But there have been times that I'm working with companies that are trying to sell. So they're trying to get really lean. And they said, how do we deliver the support center experience if average handle time and solves per hour are very important, because we're trying to lean down to make the numbers look better. And I said, well, here's what happens. People want to do business. This is an old phrase, an old expression. People want to do business with people they know, they like, and they trust. And I know that my client, I was on the phone. This was, we weren't on a Zoom call, but I know that the client was rolling his eyes when I said that. He says, you're not hearing me. I said, no, you're not hearing me. I didn't quite say it that direct to him, but I said, know, like, and trust doesn't mean we're going to spend a lot of time with you getting to know me. It's when I call you, I need to know that I'm going to like the answer you give me, and I trust it's the right one. You do that every time, and I won't have a problem. However, if you want to make the relationship a little bit better and help solidify the relationship to where it's beyond just doing business, but there's some type of emotional connection, give your agents a little bit of room to have a personality. And it doesn't have to be much, but just enough to make that customer feel appreciated beyond just, okay, I gave you what you wanted. Anything else? Thank you. Good night. Drive safe.
No, I mean, I think that's spot on. And I love how you put it around, like, give your agents a personality, something that we get so excited about with our customers, that when we see that their quality programs, their quality scorecards are less rules based, like, did you do A, did you do B? And they're more about like guidelines and like principles, like here's what that set the standards of what great quality service looks like. And then they have, that's their canvas, and they paint, butchering what I'm trying to say. Basically, they have the paintbrush to paint the whatever
Right.
they want on the canvas. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And,
So you and I talked about a little bit about this yesterday, where if you first of all, you have to hire the right people with the right personalities. And by the way, I know there's a lot of churn in our industry. And then there's other companies that say, look, we don't have that churn. And here's why. They hire the right people with the right mindset. There are people out there that love to do nothing but solve problems. And they want to start with the hardest problem, the angriest customer. And when they're finished, they want people to love them. That's their whole goal. And they love that conflict. They love making it right. So that's number one, you've hired the right people. Number two, once you know that they've got that personality, you need to give them the training. So they need to know what they can do, what they're capable of doing. There is a lot that they will learn initially, but there's an awful lot of, I'm not even going to call it a gray area. It's really black and white, but they have to be in long enough to learn what black and white really looks like. So there's a line in the sand that you never want somebody to cross. So what you must teach them is where that line is and how far they can go. And how you go about doing that is, once they have the basic structure in place and they know what the guidelines that you taught them in those first 2-3 weeks of training, and maybe it's more, maybe it's less, but it's that initial training. When to me, it's empowerment. And I know that's a soft word. Maybe it's overused, but this is what it means to me. It means that there's an old saying, 1, to say yes, 2, to say no. I want you to say yes to everything you think you can say yes to. And if it's a quirky solution or something you haven't done before, if the company's not going to lose money, it's going to help the customer, it's going to make us look good, and the customer is going to be happy and want to come back, why wouldn't we want to do it? You have permission to do it. Again, there's some parameters. Can't lose money, can't be illegal or immoral either. And it's got to be reasonable, and we got to be able to deliver. And it's important that we then share that as agents. We need to share that with our management, say, hey, this is what I did today. Did I do right? And the manager is going to say, that's wonderful. I'm going to share that with the rest of the team. And now we've just created this great learning experience that the rest of the team is going to learn a little bit more about where that line in the sand is. Contrary, if it was a bad decision, then we want to also use that as a learning experience. Very important to do. And finally, that idea of 1, to say yes, 2, to say no is, if the agent really can't figure out what to do to make this customer happy, then they should go back to the manager and say, I need help on this one. The goal being that when we teach the agent to do it this way, they'll never have to come back and ask us a second time. And when you couple that with using the right words and understanding the sentiment and the context of the call and being able to pick up on the mannerisms of the customer, I think you've got a really strong winning combination of, practical resolution mixed with, the emotional tie that you want to create with the customer.
Totally. Looking at the chat, Ariel put it very eloquently. Like agents, they need the freedom to assist the customers. And that's something that this stuff is not easy because, you have a 20-person customer service team, a 50-person, 100-person, a 500-person, whatever it is, it only gets harder. But even at 20, it's hard where, you need to make sure your team is servicing the clients awesomely. You need to also then give them freedom to be themselves and assist, but you also need to make sure there's some standards and consistency. It almost feels like a bunch of opposites or contradicting values. But if you build the right framework, a quality program, a training program, a coaching program, you hire right, we've seen customers do this effectively. Usually people get so worried about all the downsides of someone saying the wrong thing that they end up putting a bunch of rules, and it ends up leading to a worse customer experience, lower employee experience, and something that is less inspiring to go and execute every day.
Yeah. One of my favorite, I love to talk about this concept called act like the owner. And it's like, if I were the owner of this company, what would I want that customer to experience? And this goes back to a gentleman named Clark, who's about 18 years old, who worked at a pizza restaurant. And one of the guests one night asked, "Are you the owner?" And I'm thinking, the kid looks like he's 18, doesn't look like he's old enough to own the restaurant. And I said, "Why would the guest ask you that?" And Clark said, "Well, I wondered the same thing, so I asked." And the guest said, "You are just taking care of us so well. We thought if you're not the owner, you're the owner's son." And Clark told me that this made him feel so good that every customer that he interacted with, the guest from that point forward, he wanted to be so good and deliver a level of service that this customer would think that they were dealing with an owner. But two things were happening behind the scenes. Number one, he liked the owner, and we can use the word manager instead of owner. And number two, that owner, who is his manager, his boss, gave him the right to do whatever was necessary, because he told Clark, this is what Clark told me, that my manager or my owner told me that I should just go out there and do the best job possible. He knew I would do a good job. I'm a good person. I know what's right. I know what's wrong, and I'll do a good job. And I thought, wow, that takes a lot of guts to do for a young person who's 18 years old, to give that kind of empowerment to them. But that's what it took. And I would love it if every agent that I was talking to, here, I'll give you a great example. In my most recent book, I'll Be Back, How to Get Customers to Come Back Again and Again, I used an example of a gentleman at Microsoft who answered the phone. "Hello, this is William. How may I help you?" And he answered the call. And he did such a great job in resolving this person's problem. The person called back and asked to speak to that agent individually by name and said, "This person did such a great job. I hope you take care of him." Well, the gentleman named William was actually William Gates, Bill Gates, who decided to take the time to leave the big office, wherever it is at Microsoft, and go down to the support center and call center and actually take calls to, number one, understand what was going on. Number two, be able to answer questions and just be an example, a role model of how an owner or a leader should take care of that customer. I love that story. I hope it makes sense. It's a fun one.
No, that's a
Bill
great
Gates. Can you imagine getting Bill Gates on a customer support call? I'm having trouble with Windows.
The Maddie F asked this question a little bit earlier that I'd love to address, which is basically, what are the top two metrics you see companies take with you? And so if I can leave that one, Shep. So Maddie, what we see is, particularly if it's about metrics to manage agents, folks on the front lines, what I'm seeing a shift towards, which hasn't always been the case, but modern experience focused companies are putting a emphasis on CSAT and QA. The reason it's not just CSAT is because oftentimes you can't measure an agent just based on CSAT results, because the feedback a customer gives is sometimes an agent does everything correctly, but they're just upset about the answer, or it's a product issue or a policy issue. So CSAT plus quality is how they really get a good indicator on the experience agents are delivering. So those are the top two I typically see in more modern organizations. In terms of before, say, the pre-Maestro or they're a little bit more productivity focused, we'll see something like CSAT, and whether it's AHT or solves per hour, that comes up a lot too. Shep, any?
I think, and again, as I mentioned earlier, I think those two almost contradict each other, because if you're really looking at the metric of moving on to the next call, the customer is going to feel that they will. I would love to know that my agent is doing such a good job that the next time the agent or the customer called, that they would want that same agent. I love the one question survey at the end of a phone call. And by the way, the airlines were doing this for quite a while. Would you want the same agent to take care of you the next time? And then and that's a great one. And if you wanted to follow up with, an NPS type question or CSAT, you possibly could. And then I always love another question to answer. And I know we're getting a little bit off of just the two metrics, but I would love to know why we got that answer. So why did you give me a 10? What did we do right? Or maybe my favorite is the one thing. Is there one thing you could think of that would make the experience better? But I want to make sure that we do look at a CSAT type of metric. And you know what? I'm not so, I'd like to look at the churn. I'd like to know if there was a way, if we started today with a customer service initiative and we had numbers from yesterday, I'd love to know what the difference is if we eliminate average handle time and just focus on making sure that customer gets the answer they need, they want, and is happy with the way things went down. So that would be a very interesting, we can draw a line and say, yesterday we cared about average handle time and today we don't. Let's see what happens. Maybe we give it a week or two or try it for a month.
No, thank you. Thank you so much for that, Shep. And I think, so just to close things out, we're going to go through the questions in the chat, and then I'll have, add any more questions that you want to have answered by either me or Shep. And then we'll close things out in about 10 minutes, and hope everyone enjoyed the conversation so far. So from Rachel, she asked a question earlier about what recommendations do you have for client re-engagement when there's no history of consistent outreach or communications? Are there industry standards? Well, I'll go first, and then Shep, you can go second after. From my experience and from what I've seen, there aren't industry standards. And I think that's exciting because that gives Rachel, you and your team and your company an opportunity to differentiate, because there are no standard expectations. Once customers expect something, then you got to find a way to innovate to the next thing that they don't expect. But what I have seen in moments that are really successful is, how can you find moments that can add value to the customer and then do outreach? So in Shep's example earlier, if you could look at one, I'm not sure what your company does, but if you can look at a customer's account and say, hey, based on how your account's configured, there's something suboptimal here. And if you change it, you save money or you make money. Or that it's like, this is a very obvious example for everyone here, but if you can think about your own journey, your own company's customer journey, it's like, it's a delightful experience when you call the Uber, you also get a notification that it's arriving, and so that's a proactive outreach at a moment that's very helpful. And so there's moments like if you release a new product launch and you have a relationship with the customer and they're in a live chat already with you, you can do something proactive and not just answer the question, but mention a new feature or a new product or a new capability that they might not be aware of. So I think the heart of the formula starts with understanding what your customers' pains, problems, desires are, and finding the right timely moments to reach out to them based on whatever customer information you have. Shep, anything you want to add?
Yeah, and if you can, put your customers into different buckets or personas, as is the technical term that's used, you might have 5 or 6 different types of customers. And when they call in and they ask this question, you make them happy with your answer and you're finished. Maybe shortly after the interaction, whether it be call, chat, whatever, you send an email, and that email has an article based on the conversation, the question that was there. It's obviously not the exact conversation, but you can have a big, database of articles, if you will, that are extremely appropriate. And you can set this up as a campaign that will re-engage with the customer in a few weeks. Say, hey, I know you called a few weeks ago and we sent you this article. Here's another article that it ties into this that might be interesting to you, has another feature. And every once in a while, you're dropping content to them, because content is part of the customer experience. And that what happens, it just makes it easier for that customer to want to call you. Basically, you're training them to think about you. And this is really important. At the very beginning of our conversation, we talked a little bit about how do you get that relationship to be a little bit stickier. And I mentioned how Amazon weaves you into weaves themselves into the fabric of a customer's life. This is a great way of doing it, is sharing information that will help the customer be more successful with whatever it is you sell over a period of time. So you're not being salesy, you're being helpful, you're delivering a content experience.
Nice. Thank you so much, Shep. The last question from Eileen Shu. Apologize if I didn't pronounce that properly. But great question here. Do you think companies should invest more in servicing or tech/product to improve CX? If both, how to best balance the both?
Both.
Yeah. Well, so that, of course, the answer is both, but I get the challenge of priorities. I'll go first, and then Shep, let me know what you think and if
Sure.
you agree or want to add anything. I think the answer is both. And the harder part is then, okay, how do you balance both? And ultimately, I don't know if I would love to know some specifics around what we're trying to balance, but ultimately what I would look at is if the customer experience is caused by a product issue and it's happening at large scale and highly consequential, the friction is happening a ton and it's really frustrating, you have to go fix that as a product issue. If the customer friction is happening from a person, it's happening at large scale and highly consequential, then you also got to really prioritize that. The key is figuring out whether it's a service issue or a product issue. If it's happening at high scale and hyper consequential, or is it happening at low scale and not consequential? So that's how I think about it, based on the scale of the issue and the severity of it. And I think from there, what you would find is a list of, okay, product, service, product, service, service, service. You could interweave solving product issues versus service issues once that framework is put into place. Because it's not like you tackle all the product issues first and then all the service issues. It's some hybrid of both based on the consequentialness of the issue and the scale of the issue. Hopefully that made sense. It was a little academic.
So I'm going to agree with everything, although I don't know if and again, I'm not, how do you pronounce her name? Alon? Okay. But with that question about tech product, are we talking about investing in a tech solution or a product that will enhance the service experience? I'm wondering if that was the angle she was hitting. But back to what you were saying, Sue, first, if you have problems that you are called about all of the time, this is what I ask my clients. Let's sit down in a room. Let's bring some stakeholders in. Stakeholders meaning people on the front line, the manager, the call center. What are the number one biggest problems you hear over and over again? I love this question because they will tell, this one happens all day, every day. We get this question and I'm going, why? Fix it, stop it, mitigate it, figure out a way to not make it happen. You know it's going to come. So what are you doing to get it fixed before you get there? That's number one. So we go to that product or we go to whatever it is that's causing that issue. So let's talk a little bit more about this. I want to share with you some stats again from the report. We asked, and this is where I'm going to go to the tech product, and assuming that you're looking for a product that will help improve the customer experience. And again, not a blatant pitch, but this is, MaestroQA is one of those products. So how do you invest in this? Well, 71% of the customers said, I will use self-service tools. But that doesn't mean that's where they want to go first. They said, that's all they said was they'd be willing to use self-service tools. What we found, and this is important, is that this year, 2022, when asked, when you have a problem or issue, where do you want to go first? And we gave them options of telephone and chat and email and social media and all that. 65% prefer to use the phone over a digital solution. And by the way, that's up from 59% last year. I have a theory. Part of that was because COVID, people just wanted to talk to people and instead of deal with a digital solution. But I think that's important to recognize, is that still the phone is the number one way people want to reach out to you. So if you're going to invest in technology and support, do it there. Still, best companies have figured out customers still, many of them want a digital experience. So we've got to balance out, give them the digital experience they want. And maybe even though this is the way they prefer to talk to us on the phone, maybe during these conversations, we teach them how to use the digital experience. So the next time they get a quick, fast, easy answer, and they're happy with the solution they have without having to call us. And by the way, that eliminates average handle time questions altogether.
Thank you so much, Shep, for the time. Thank you for everyone who's joined in and the questions as well. To wrap up, Shep, why is it an exciting time to work in customer service?
Boy, I tell you what, this more than anything, it's the competitive differentiator. For the last 10, 12 years, companies like Forrester and Gartner have said service and experience are becoming the differentiator. This is where companies are going to invest. If there's ever a time to be excited about delivering an experience that makes the customers happy and want to come back, this is the time to do it because they know what it's about. They appreciate good service and they come back to the places that provide it.
Amazingly well said. Thank you so much. Thank you for everyone. And thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.